What happens when your neighbor decides your land is their personal playground? Not just a borrowed shovel or a stray frisbee, but a full-on invasion of your sanctuary, as if your property deed is just a scrap of paper. My name is Daniel, and I'm a land surveyor by trade, a man who lives by the unyielding truth of steel pins and geodetic markers. I never imagined my quiet profession would become my sharpest weapon, but when my neighbor, Claire, claimed my orchard, my gazebo, and half my backyard as her personal estate, I drew a line in the dust so precise it reshaped our little corner of the world. This is the story of how I used the meticulous art of surveying to dismantle a tyrant's delusion, one stake at a time, in a showdown so dramatic it's still the talk of our sleepy rural town. It began when I bought my slice of heaven, a quaint farmhouse on a sprawling acre at the edge of a small town, purchased with every dime I'd saved from years of crunching coordinates in a dusty office. The property's crown jewel was a small apple orchard, a weathered gazebo, and a wide lawn that sloped gently to a creek. It was my refuge, a place to escape the noise of the world. For 2 glorious months, it was perfect. Then I met Claire, who lived in the sleek, modern house next door, its glass walls glinting like a fortress over my rustic plot. Our first encounter was her striding across my lawn, her designer boots crunching my grass, to inform Minute asked that the previous owner, a reclusive widower named Mr. Callahan, had always let her host barbecues in my gazebo and picnics in my orchard. I offered a polite smile, said I preferred my privacy, and figured that was that. I was wrong. To Claire, my boundaries were as invisible as the wind. It started small, her kids' soccer balls rolling into my orchard, left there like forgotten trophies. I tossed them back over her fence. Then one evening, I came home to find Claire, her husband, and a gaggle of friends lounging in my gazebo, their laughter echoing as they sipped wine on my benches. I approached, calm but firm, and explained this was private property. Claire rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with condescension. "Relax, Daniel," she said, gathering her group with theatrical slowness. "Neighbors share. It's how things work here." I let it go, hoping she'd respect my space. She didn't. 3 weeks later, I was working late in my home office when a roar of music, shouting, and the unmistakable clink of beer bottles hit me like a tidal wave. I stepped outside and froze. My orchard was a carnival. 50 strangers sprawled across my lawn, kids swinging from my apple trees, and a makeshift volleyball net strung up in my gazebo. At the heart of it all was Claire, radiant in a sundress, directing her court like a queen. She saw me at the edge of the chaos, raised her glass in a mocking salute, and smirked. That smirk lit a fuse. I'm not one for yelling or fistfights. My world is precision angles, bearings, and legal descriptions that don't bend to ego. Claire had just become a smudge on my map, and I was going to erase it with the sharpest tool I had: truth. The next morning, I surveyed the wreckage-trampled grass, broken branches, and a sea of plastic cups littering my orchard like cheap confetti. I marched to Claire's house, rang the bell, and waited. She answered in a silk scarf, holding a smoothie, looking at me like I was a pesky salesman. "Claire," I said, voice steady, "your party trashed my property. It can't happen again." She laughed. "Oh, it was a blast. Everyone said it was the best yet." I explained the damage, the trespassing, the hours of chaos. She waved me off. "Daniel, this is how it's been for years." Mr. Callahan loved it. He was part of the community. Then she disappeared inside and returned with her masterpiece. A piece of graph paper with a pencil sketch of our properties, a jagged line claiming my gazebo and orchard as community grounds. She held it up like a royal decree. "The line's always been blurry here," she said. "It's basically shared space." I stared at the sketch, then at her, searching for a hint she was joking. She wasn't. I countered with facts. I had the official survey from the county, drawn with precision instruments, not pencils. She scoffed. "Those old surveys are nonsense. My realtor said they're just formalities." That was it. Arguing with her was like wrestling a storm. I walked away, her graph paper burned into my mind. She didn't believe in boundaries or deeds, she believed in her own narrative. I couldn't just tell her where the line was. I had to make it undeniable. The time for words was over. The time for surveying had begun. Claire's audacity only grew. Her kids' soccer balls became a daily assault, retrieved without a glance. Her outdoor speakers blared country music toward my house, louder each day. Then came the knockout punch. A crisp envelope in my mailbox with an invoice for $200 from Claire's Orchard Events, a fictional company, charging me for grounds maintenance and event oversight. It was so bold, I nearly admired her nerve. Nearly. I tossed it in the trash and let Daniel the quiet neighbor step back. Daniel the surveyor took over. I dove into my work, logging into the county's digital archives. I pulled the 1975 plat for our properties, digitized it, and overlaid it on recent satellite imagery. My orchard, gazebo, and lawn were indisputably mine. But I needed a case so airtight Claire couldn't wriggle out. I dug deeper, pulling aerial photos from the 1950s, original land grants, and zoning records. Hours ticked by, the silence broken only by the thud of Claire's kids' soccer balls. Then, in a faded PDF from 1980, I struck gold, a surveyor's correction affidavit. The original plat had a clerical error, referencing a temporary marker instead of a permanent geodetic benchmark at the road's edge. The corrected line shifted the boundary 20 feet into Claire's yard, slicing through her prized herb garden and the massive maple tree she'd hung a hammock from. Mr. Callahan, old and uninterested, likely never enforced it. For decades, everyone assumed the wrong line. But the law was clear. The 1980 correction was the truth. I grabbed my survey-grade GPS unit and walked the line, confirming the coordinates. Standing in Claire's herb garden, the scent of crushed thyme underfoot, I looked at her hammock swinging from my tree and grinned. This wasn't just about my orchard, it was about reclaiming what was mine. I called Apex Surveys, the best firm in the county, and sent them my dossier, the 1975 plat, the 1980 affidavit, my analysis. The lead surveyor, Tom, laughed. I've seen my share of pencil sketches. They don't hold up. We scheduled a full survey for 3 weeks out, to be filed as the official record. Next, I called a fencing company, requesting a 7-foot iron fence stark, immovable, a statement in metal. Finally, I chatted with Mrs. Larson, the town's gossip queen, who revealed Claire's annual harvest hoedown was in 3 weeks. The stars were aligning. I played the defeated neighbor, ignoring Claire's escalating provocations, more balls, louder music, even her kids picking my apples. She bragged to a neighbor, her voice carrying, "He's finally learned how things work." She had no clue I was planning her downfall. The day before her hoedown, a glossy flyer appeared in my mailbox, inviting me to her 10th annual harvest hoedown at our rustic retreat, a photo of my orchard. I kept it as evidence. The morning of the event, Claire's preparations roared to life. A live band, a bounce house in my orchard, and tables under my gazebo. By noon, cars lined the road, and guests flooded my land. Claire, in a cowboy hat, directed her kingdom. At 1:30 p.m., Apex Surveys van rolled in, followed by a truck. For surveyors in neon vests set up tripods and a total station. The band faltered as guests stared. Claire stormed over. "What's going on?" she demanded. Tom was cool as steel. "Boundary survey, ma'am." She threatened the police. He invited her to call. Then it hit. A surveyor drove a bright orange stake into her herb garden. Claire shrieked. I stepped into my orchard, holding the certified survey and her flyer. All eyes locked on me. "Claire, this is the corrected boundary from a 1980 affidavit," I said, voice clear. "It runs through your garden, your tree, and my orchard." Another stake went in. Then another, claiming my gazebo, my lawn. Claire's face twisted in fury. "That's fake. Everyone knows the lines by the creek." I held up her flyer. "This is my orchard you're advertising." The crowd gasped. Then, like a thunderclap, the fencing truck arrived. It's beeping a death knell for Claire's reign. Workers unloaded iron posts. Her empire was collapsing. She called the police, but after reviewing my documents and Tom's licenses, they called it a civil matter. "The boundary's legal," they said. Guests fled, leaving deflated bounce houses and spilled drinks. The fencing crew began digging, the first post sinking with a clang that echoed like justice. Claire's social throne crumbled. The fence rose in days, a towering iron wall through her garden, guarding my tree, my orchard, my peace. Her lawsuit fizzled me. Evidence was bulletproof. The town buzzed with the tale, Claire's reputation shattered. She tried a barbecue at a local park, barely a dozen showed. I spent the fall harvesting my apples, the fence my monument, the silence my prize. Claire's fantasy met the hard edge of fact, and I proved a quiet surveyor with a map can redraw the world.